small till it ain't, till it ain't, till it ain't, till it ain't. I'm building up a wall till it breaks. She hated when I call and it's late. I don't wanna keep you waiting. I hope I never keep you waiting. She think I know it all, but I don't.
Welcome to the Mixtape with Scott. I'm the host, Scott Cunningham. I'm a professor of economics at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. And this is a podcast about the personal stories of living economists. It's a different type of podcast, if you've not listened to it, than your typical econ podcast. I saw someone leave a comment somewhere after listening to one of the podcast episodes. They were terribly upset because there wasn't any economics in it. And that's not entirely true because one of the definitions of economics is whatever economists do. And so I'm doing this, so therefore all of this is economics. But seriously, though, this is the story of personal economists. And today's guest is Marie Connolly. She's a professor of economics at University of Quebec at Montreal. And I asked Marie to be on the podcast because she is one of Alan Krueger's students. And I am wanting to interview as many of Dr. Krueger's advisees as I can. There were either 19 or 20 of them. And so she is the first person in that list that I was wanting to reach out to. And that is not a statement to say that I'm only interested in her as a student of Alan Krueger, and that's actually not true. I've corresponded with Marie in 2007 or 2008 because her Jolly paper on estimating the intertemporal labor supply elasticities had just come out in the Journal of Labor Economics. And I had read it with real interest, and I had emailed her about it. And when I got the list of Dr. Krueger's students, I saw Marie on there, and I said, I haven't spoken to her in a million years. So I was really excited to catch up and see what she's been up to. She is a labor economist, not surprisingly. She's a labor economist that has worked on a very large range of topics. One of them is the economics of music, of rock and roll, and other topics in culture, economics of culture, but also she has worked a lot on time use. She was one of the early economists that worked on the American Time Use Survey when it started to come out. She began to early on use it, and that was on what her job market paper was on. And then she's also done a lot of work on education and children. And so I'm going to turn it over to those two people to talk right now. But I want to thank you for tuning in, and thank you for all your support. I hope you enjoy the podcast episode. Well, it's a pleasure to meet my guest today. That we were just joking that we corresponded when we both were fresh out of grad school. Marie Connolly, it's nice to have you on the show.
Well, it's nice to be here.
For the sake of the listener, will you tell us your full title and who pays your paycheck?
Right. So I'm Marie Connolly. I'm professor of economics at the University of Quebec in Montreal, and that's who pays my paycheck.
That's who pays your paycheck. Well, let's get started. Okay, so I wanted to do an icebreaker first before we get started. So, what's a vacation that you took before that? It doesn't have to be your favorite one, but you've noticed that you still think about it every now and then.
Right. I think I'm gonna have to go with when was it? It was 2016, so 8 years ago already.
Hmm.
I was gonna be on sabbatical in California, Berkeley, and with my family. Kids were about to turn 4 and 7,
Hmm.
and so my husband and I we decided to go to California from Montreal,
Hmm.
driving, and
Oh,
so
drove it.
we drove across Canada and then down the West Coast. Took us a month, and
Oh,
we camped exclusively. We camped all the way. So that was a month-long camping vacation road trip
Oh
with
my
the kids.
gosh.
And the following summer, we did like the reverse, except because it was going through southern US, it wasn't camping all the time because it was
Yeah.
hot.
Right, right. So you love camping. Did you grow up camping?
I did, yeah. Lots of camping trips, camps, nature, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's cool. That I mean, a month long. Did the kids like it? Did they enjoy that drive? I mean, it's
Oh
so
yeah. Oh
pretty.
yeah. Yeah. It was like the greatest geography lesson as you go across the landscape. North America is amazing. You go
Yeah.
from the East Coast, the West Coast, the prairies, the mountains, everything. And when you get to see the Pacific Ocean for the first time, I remember it was like amazing. We were in
Yeah.
Oregon, and it was just like this most beautiful thing ever.
Ugh,
So yeah, and also going through, the landscape, but also going through the different places. Um, and I think as an economist, live on the coast or close to the East Coast. You tend to forget about, all the places in between.
right.
Um, so
Right.
it's nice to see also the different areas for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Montreal. I was
Oh.
born and raised in Montreal, so I'm French Canadian.
Oh. What's Montreal like for a kid?
Oh, it's amazing. It's a great city. I really like that city. A lot of cities in the US have had, over the past decades, this white flight, the hollowing out of the city center and everything. Well, that really hasn't happened that much in Montreal.
Hmm.
And so I live in a very central neighborhood, one of the densest neighborhood in the country, actually.
Wow.
And you can walk everywhere. It's kind of like being in New York, but not quite
Hmm.
as crazy in terms of rents and things like that. So
Oh.
it's nice for kids. You can sort of walk around, go to school, go shopping. There's
It's very
parks.
urban. Where you live is like a very urban, but very dense kind of.
Yeah, but urban, but not like I lived in New York for a couple years, and when we moved back here with my husband, we're like, oh my God, we can see the sky.
Right. Right.
So
Right. Right.
it's urban, but it's not, crazy dense.
Oh, wow. That sounds wonderful. So what did your parents do for a living?
So my dad has a PhD in linguistics.
Oh.
But and worked his first few years out of PhD, worked at the University of Montreal, so worked like academic related, but then started his own company of editing services, so translation, proofreading,
Mm,
copy editing, all sorts of services related to written
mm,
materials.
mm.
Um, my mom is what we would now call ABD, all but dissertation in
Oh.
linguistics. That's how they
Oh,
met.
wow.
Um,
That's how they met?
and yeah, that's how they met. But she never finished her dissertation, but then she wrote textbooks to learn French, especially French as a second language,
Oh,
and
she
later.
wasn't Canadian? She wasn't French Canadian?
Oh, she's French. Actually, she's French from France. So
Oh,
she
she was
immigrated
writing,
here
she wrote books
to
that were,
learn French
oh, books for other people to learn
for
French.
the people to
Got
learn
it.
French,
Got it.
especially French as a second language. So,
Mm,
targeted to, let's say, immigrants or newcomers
yeah,
to a place that need to learn
right.
French. And then she switched careers and she went into psychology. So
Oh,
she worked as a therapist for a number of years after that.
oh, wow. Wow. Did you have any siblings?
I have one older sibling, a brother.
Oh, a brother.
Yep.
Well, so what did you, if I could have found you as a kid, like maybe early middle school on like a random Saturday, maybe like in the afternoon or something, what would I have found you doing?
Um, Probably playing on a computer or or
Oh,
on my
yeah.
Nintendo.
Uh-huh.
I had access to computers at a time when not that many people did, but
Yeah.
my dad had computers for his work because he was doing all the copy editing and stuff.
Yeah.
And so the first two or three computers I think were PCs,
Yeah.
old big things. But then he mostly had Macs.
Oh.
And Macs were also super fun to play with. You could do like, you know, paint
Paint stuff,
create
right?
like art, like computer
Yeah.
art, but then you could also program sounds and things or play
Mm.
vigorous games. So I think I like to play computer games as well as Nintendo type.
What kind of computer games did you like? What was the genre?
Uh, Good question. So I remember the very early Oregon Trail
Yeah.
type
Mhm.
stuff. Except we had this Canadian version that was it's like the Manitoba Trail or something. I'd, I'd have to find it. And the lemonade stand one also was one of the early ones that is complete like supply and demand type thing, right? Where you set the price, you buy your sugar and your lemons, and then you set the price of your things. I didn't
Yeah.
know it was economics. I just, was playing
Right.
that. Um, and then later games got a bit more complicated, but I don't remember
Did you
exactly. I'm
like the
trying to find.
story games though? That Oregon Trail, it's like it's a little more narrative, right?
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
strategy. Is it strategic?
Is it? I mean, there's a lot of randomness, right? There's a lot of luck because like
Oh,
you get like draws, right? You draw what next event you're gonna have, and so
oh,
is
okay.
your are you gonna get a snake bite or whatever? So
Oh,
there's lots of draw.
yeah. Yeah.
But I also like just to sort of like fool around with the computer and
Mm.
like create stuff like art or posters or
Oh,
music
okay.
or
Okay.
various
Yeah.
things like that.
I bet we were the same age because you graduated high school, what, like 1975, or 1994?
No, not 75. Yeah.
I was born in 75. That's what I meant.
I was born in 78, so there you
Oh,
go.
78. You're a little
So
older. Okay.
roughly the same
Younger.
age, yeah.
Got
Yeah.
it. Got it. Got it. Well, so what did you want to be when you grew up? When you were like, maybe just like fifth or sixth grade?
Probably I had a archaeologist phase,
Yeah.
with the Indiana Jones type
Yeah.
movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, and there was also a kid cartoon. It's I don't know if it's French. It might not be French, but I was listening to it in French. I don't think it's American. Of these kids in the Andes and Inca and civilizations and stuff like that, and to discover old civilizations and stuff. And so that was kind of,
Hmm.
I think, fascination. But it didn't last all that long. But at that age, I think it was what I was interested in.
How'd you find that stuff? You find that through you were like enjoying books or something, reading certain books or something?
Yeah, TV like culture, just like TV,
Mm.
books. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So then you go to high school. So what was your high school like?
So I went to so in Quebec, high school starts in grade 7,
Oh.
and so it's a secondary school. And I went to this uh, nun school, a convent, like a religious school.
Hmm.
Except it was just after it was Quebec. It was a very religious place, very Catholic. And then at some point started, getting away from all the religious stuff. So the
Yeah.
schools became not like became secular.
Mm.
Um, Except the school I went to had this very religious tradition, and so it was like still half run by nuns. There was a part of the school was a dormitory residence for older, aging nuns. And so it was kind of strict. It was all girls
Mm.
with a school uniform and things like that. And I lasted 4 years there
From
out
seven,
of
eight,
five.
out of the
Seven,
five,
yeah, 7, 8, 9, 10, I guess. And we end in grade 11 and I switched school
you
at
just
that point.
liked it the whole time. You didn't like it.
No, 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 it was really good to start with. After a while, I was just kind of like, you know what? It was a little too strict for my liking.
Yeah.
So I switched school.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah.
So what classes did you like in high school, either at the Catholic school or at your new school?
Um, I like math. I liked science. I remember we had tech. Do you call it tech where you build stuff?
Yeah.
I like we learned Latin and I like that.
Mhm.
I was pretty good at it. And I liked history, especially when we were grade 10, 11. History was very
Mm.
interesting.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it's funny. I mean, so you're you enjoyed math, you're probably good at math, but you keep bringing up these things that you liked, and it was like art, playing games, history, Latin. So you must have this just kind of Renaissance personality or something. You have like a lot. You have both sides of the brain a little bit. Is that right?
I guess. I guess I know I was not interested in just like science for pure science, like
Mm,
chemistry and physics. I mean, I think I was, yeah, I'm sort of curious and I like it, but like I prefer the sort of society, learning about society.
mm.
Yeah, and I guess the historical stuff is interesting to understand where we're at now, right?
Yeah,
And
right,
how things came about, how we organized ourselves as a, you know, a species
right,
into the society we live in today.
right. You were thinking like that. So that so when you were in high school, by the end of high school, how are you different? What do you notice looking back? What kind of young person were you at the end of high school that's different? And how did you stay the same from when you were like middle school? Had you started to change a lot that you can think of, but then also stayed the same?
Between middle school and high school?
Yeah. Did you notice anything about
Um,
yourself?
that's a good question. Well, I guess that's when you start to understand that things are a bit more complex than than they appear. I think when
Mhm.
when you're, middle school age, things are very black or white,
Right.
and at some point things get a bit more complicated. And I'm not talking about my personal life. I'm just talking about like just again
Yeah.
with
The
these
world.
ideas of how the world, right? The
Right.
world is not so much black and white. It's more
Hmm.
complicated. There's stuff you don't see, especially if you start reading or learning about politics, influence, and beliefs and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So you end up going, what did you want to be when you grew up at the very end of high school? How is it? What are you thinking about then?
So, I have to explain a thing about Quebec. We have this system where we end high school in grade 11,
Hmm.
and then we don't go to college right away. We go to this 2-year pre-university college, kind of like a
Oh,
junior college,
huh,
like a mini liberal arts degree, let's say.
huh.
And so it's like you take the last year of high school and the first year of college, and you put them together in this in between hybrid college. And then when you get to university, typically your undergrad degree is in 3 years. So the total number of years stays the same. It's just the way you arrange it is a little bit different. And so at the end of my high school, actually, I did not like economics. I had one class in grade 11, and it was the most boring course I had ever taken. It was not my favorite subject at all. The
Yeah.
one thing I remember was learning about compound interest,
Ah,
which, is really interesting, but
yeah.
not that interesting, right? Like, not like philosophically kind of like, oh, this is how the world works kind of thing.
Right.
Um, but when you get to that 2-year college, you have to pick not a major, but a general field. And so either you go in sciences, like physics, chemistry, if you want to go to the hard sciences, or medicine,
Mm.
or you do social science, like history, politics, economics,
Mhm.
or you go more arts and communication, that kind of stuff. So I knew I wanted to go in social science, but I thought more politics or history.
Mm.
But I had no choice but to
So is this at the in-between college?
that's in between college.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, and so it's like the equivalent of grades 12 and 13, let's say.
What do they call it?
Um,
What is the name of this in-between college?
it's called CEGEP. It's the French acronym for basically general and professional college.
Oh,
And there's two tracks actually. There's the pre-university track, which is 2 years, and it's like liberal arts. It's very liberal arts. You take French, English, philosophy,
mm.
and physical education, and then the
Oh,
classes in your topic kind of thing. Um, Or there's also, which but I didn't do, but there's also a professional track. So if you want to go to any trade kind of school, like
Yeah.
a construction trade or lab technician, technical kind of stuff. So, but it's called CJEP.
Mm.
Um,
Wait, did you
you have a
stay in
hard time.
Quebec? Did you stay in Quebec for it?
Oh yeah, yeah. I stayed in Montreal. I was living with my parents.
Montreal. Yeah, yeah, Montreal.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah,
Okay, got it, got it, got it.
yeah.
Okay, wait. So keep going. I interrupted you. So you were saying,
Right. So I started my CJEP, my this 2 year college,
yeah.
and I know I want to do social science. So I
Okay.
take social science with math, and
Mm,
the first semester, it's a semester based. So the first semester, I have no choice. I have to take econ, even though I was trying to avoid all econ because my experience with the compound interest.
right.
And so, but I had no choice, and I take econ, and my professor is this young, sort of straight out of a master's degree, very funny guy, and I fell in love with the discipline. I was like, oh my
Mm,
God, now it makes sense. Now I get it. It was like
yeah.
basic principles, macro. And I was like, oh my God, this is so interesting. I'm learning about the world and I can put math on it. So I can use, it makes more sense to
Right.
me than, history and politics are very fascinating, but they're mostly about blah, 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 right? You're talking, you're using words to frame your thinking. Whereas this, you're using mathematical equations. And I thought it was great. So then I switched to all the econ that I could possibly take.
Uh,
Um, and then when I
because it's mapping onto your interest in the social sciences and this kind of philosophical thing you got emerging.
yeah, and then at that point when you're in this 2 year college, it's very short, and so you're also sort of deciding what are you going to do for college. And so at that point I go, well, I know what I want to do. I want to major in econ. So
Mm,
that's how I got that.
mm, mm. So wait, so you graduate and so in this in between college, do a lot of people sort of treat it as like a terminal, or some people just will be like, I'm not going to go on.
Yeah, some people stop after. It's like a natural stopping point.
Right.
That said, you know, maybe half of the kids these days, go to college, get a college degree, or
Mm.
maybe a little bit fewer men and more women, but so a fair number uh, does go on to college. I think those that uh, decide, like, no, they're not going to do anymore, might go for the professional, like the
Yeah.
trade more
Hmm.
kind of school, and
Right, right,
get
right.
something that they can actually do something with,
Right,
uh,
right, right.
learn
Yeah,
something
sure.
useful.
Sure. So you go to the University of Montreal. Was there ever a doubt that you wouldn't go there? I don't know I mean, is that
There was there
really?
there was so first of I had this fascination or interest for American universities. So I did apply to go to some places in the US. I don't remember all of the ones that I applied, but I know I applied to Harvard and didn't get in. And I applied to Dartmouth and I did get in. But in the end, I chose to stay in Montreal. I'm not exactly quite sure why. I think I was like, well, um, I'm not quite sure why, um, but I enrolled it at McGill University, which is right downtown Montreal.
Mm.
And I went there for a week and realized that that's not where I wanted to be. So then I switched and I went to the University of Montreal. So no,
Oh,
it wasn't sure at all that I was going to go to the University of Montreal.
oh. Wait, so what's the difference? Why'd you not like McGill?
So McGill is very much like an American university in the sense that it's a liberal arts school. And
Yeah.
so when you start your college, if you're a student if you're coming from the CJEP system from Quebec, you only do 3 years, but it's 3 years are based on a liberal arts system. And so you have a major, um, or you can have a honors track, but you have a major, and you take maybe half your credits in that major or something like that. There's a path to get to your major,
Yeah.
but but when you start, you have to take the prerequisites. It's like the system, like I'm assuming where you teach,
Yeah.
where your first semester or your first year, you take sort of like base level courses and then you build onto that.
Mhm.
But you take a variety of courses, right? It's not just econ. It would be econ and some literature or some religion or some whatever.
Yeah.
And I had done that for 2 years when I was at that CGIP. And so when I show up at McGill and I need to do my course selection, I'm like, but how come I can only take 2 econ classes? I want to do econ. I know that's what I want to do. I don't need to shop around and try to figure out what my interests are. And so I went to see the advisor and they're like, no, no, it's liberal arts. You do all that kind of, you do, random variety of classes. And when I realized that, I was like, wait, that's not what I want to do. And in the French system, so University of Montreal is more like the French system, well, at least the French from Quebec system.
Mm.
And they're out of the 30 courses that you have to take over 3 years to get your degree, they're almost all, like 27 out of the 30 are in econ.
Oh.
So it's much more specialized at that level.
Oh, I
Um,
see.
and then they're all econ and they're all for economists. And so you might have a class that is not maybe like econ and politics, but it's like for econ
Right.
or methods, but it's like for economists. And so
Right.
that I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. I know
Wow,
that's what I
so
want to do.
this experience at the in-between college really left a big impression on you. You knew it. You knew so much that you wanted to do economics that you like switched colleges.
Yeah, yeah, I did.
Wow.
Um, I did. I'm not saying I'm like, the only one or everybody's like that, but I do believe that's a strength of that system. It's at an age where you get to discover many things, and then you
Oh.
can sort of figure out where you want to go for not necessarily the institution, but the program that you're most interested in for
Hmm.
your university after that.
Hmm. Hmm. So, is there a point while you're a college student where you think, not only do I love economics and want to do economics, but like I want to be an economist? Does that happen at some point, or is it just I love
Um,
the major? And would you have said I love economics? I was just actually may have put those words in your mouth.
no, I did. I really liked it.
Uh,
I think I always wonder if people select, if you look at people who are, say, econ professors now, do they select that major, that field, because they like, the structure of the discipline and the way people think about stuff? You're going to think in terms of, I don't know, whether it's like cost benefit or comparative advantage
yeah.
or opportunity costs, or those kind of like ways to think about stuff, which is not everybody, but it does talk to me. So I
Mm,
always wonder if I chose a discipline because it appeals to me, or because for whatever reason, I started, studying that field. It changed the way I
right.
think, and I'm
Right,
not
right,
quite
right.
sure which way it runs. Probably a
Hmm.
bit of both,
Hmm.
but no, I knew I liked the discipline. I
Hmm.
wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I remember I had a friend, a classmate, who from sort of like day one knew he wanted to be a professor, college
Mm.
professor. And I was like, I don't know what I want. So no, I did not know what I wanted to do, but I knew I liked it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So then, but then you graduate. Janet Curry told me, and I saw it on your video. I was like, I wonder if this is what Marie's deal was. She said, I was like, well, why'd you do this immediate master's in Canada? Why didn't you just like go to America? And she said, I think this is what she said. She said, well, that's how we did it in Canada.
That's
Is that what
exactly
happened
right.
with you?
Yeah, it's like 1, 2, 3, right? You do your bachelor number one, master's number two, and PhD number three.
Oh,
You don't go from 1 to 3 without going through number two, right?
it was just really natural. You kind of knew at some point that I'm gonna, I'm just gonna go to grade 17. Like,
right,
I was
right.
like, it's not like
So
you think of it as this big deal.
right, and so the way it worked for me is towards the end of my undergrad, I if you if you're if you had good grades, you could start taking master's level courses.
Yeah.
And so in my last couple semesters, I took the courses that were required for the master's. And it just made sense to sort of, I didn't really know what I wanted to do,
Yeah.
but it was like available to me. Hey, you can stay for another year and basically write a master's thesis and
Right.
get your master's degree and sort of, and then you can figure out later what you want to do. And so I was like, oh, sure, I'll do it, right? Like that seemed like an easy solution to the problem of what am I going to do in my life.
Right.
Um, and and I think by the time I started the program, I only had to take two courses because I had
Yeah, it
taken
looked
all
like it was
I,
really fast.
yeah, it says 1 year. I did it in 1 year. And typically, I mean, if you need to take all the classes, because some people come and they don't necessarily have all the background, the econ undergrad degree, right? And so then they might have to take a few extra classes to get up to the right level. And so they have 1 year of coursework and 1 year to write their thesis. Well, I did it just all in 1 year.
Mm. Are you already pretty like mathed out? Like by the time you go to the masters and because you mentioned that I don't remember if you said in college you were taking math classes, but I know you said you liked math. Were you already in the master's program, like fully prepped for a PhD program? Like you had all the math?
Not not enough.
Oh yeah.
No, I got thoroughly whacked in my in my first year PhD. So I think what happens, I think the good side of having an undergrad degree that is focused on econ is that you get all these interesting topics class, right? So I had like, you know, uh, not just micro, macro, but also public finance, labor, history, all those kind of econ classes.
Yeah.
And we also had some methods class. So that was kind of like the quote unquote math class, but it wasn't math. It wasn't math class. Like it wasn't in the math department.
Ah,
And I think in retrospect, it probably would have been more helpful, at least for my first year of PhD, to have taken, say, real analysis, the
right.
full-on course taught by a mathematician.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
But
so
but back so because I didn't major in econ, so I actually have never known like what. But was it is you think that you were you did you do you think that you would have known to take real analysis back then? I mean, was it
no, no, I,
yeah?
I
Okay, so
wouldn't.
it
I
wasn't
would.
like
That's why I didn't.
your professors weren't saying you need to take real analysis to
No,
just in case.
not not really. I mean, I know around the time, I think it was around the time when I was there, they started a double major, econ and math. Um, but I just didn't see the point. I
Yeah,
didn't think, I was like, well, I don't want to do math. I want to do econ, right?
right,
And so
right.
I think my professor didn't, either they said it and I didn't hear it,
Yeah,
or I just, they just didn't think of it.
yep.
But the level of math that we saw through econ is not the same as what we would have seen straight out from math classes.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally.
So
So,
I have a decent background, but not like as solid as some that would
yep.
come as math majors, let's say.
Right. So you graduate that master's, and I guess at some point in that master's program, it sounds like you must have had this awakening that you're like, yeah, I do want to become an economist. Is that what happens?
Yeah. So after I finished my, yeah, how did it work? After I finished my master's, I traveled for a bit
Okay.
in South America, just to take a break, and then I came back and I went to see my old professors. We're working in a research center, and I said, "Do you have a job for me? I'm not doing anything." And so then they're like, "Sure." So they gave me a job as a RA, um, and I worked there for a few months.
This
And
is
then I'm
after the
thinking,
master's. This is after the
after the masters,
okay.
after the masters,
Oh, so
and I
you
work
did
as
not know that you wanted to do a PhD when you graduated the master's.
not yet. I mean, I kind of felt like I needed a break, or I wanted to figure things out. I mean,
Yeah.
I was thinking about it, but no, I wasn't like, it's not wasn't like straight from one to the other.
Yeah.
And while I was working as an RA, I that fall I applied. That's when I applied to grad school. So there I applied to grad school, and I have another year or so at the moment you send your application. That's almost a year until you might start grad school. So
Mm.
then I looked for something else to do, and I worked. I got an internship at the United Nations
Oh.
at the development program. So I was working in South Africa at the UNDP.
Oh, wow. Wait, so you've applied to grad school and then you get
and
this
then I and then I
tip
go.
from the
Yeah,
UN
and then I go on an internship.
in South
Because I thought,
Africa?
yeah, I thought I wanted to do development
Yeah,
economics, and so the UN sounded like a interesting place to be.
right.
So I get this internship, and then I go to South Africa for 7 months, maybe.
7 months? And
Yeah,
you've already sent in your grad application?
I've sent in my application. So actually, I got phone calls while I was in South Africa. Hey,
Oh,
you got into the PhD program.
yeah. Was it a
Yeah.
hard decision to take Princeton or like what did you know? What did you know about Princeton when you were sending stuff out? Did anybody tell you that? I mean, of course I know that you knew it's an Ivy League school, but what I mean is, did you have a sense of how awesome its labor tradition was?
No.
No.
No, I had no sense. I had applied to schools in or around New York and in California, purely based on geography.
Yeah.
I didn't apply to Harvard or MIT just because I didn't like Boston, which doesn't sound like the greatest decision, but anyway, there it was. And I remember one of my professors, when I told him my strategy, was like, because I told him, oh, I'm going to apply to Columbia, NYU. And then he was like, well, have you considered Princeton? I was like, well, where is that? And then he's like, well, it's not that far from New York. So I was like, okay, I'll apply. So, right. So I apply. I get in. As also I got in the other places too. So then they offer to go visit,
Yeah.
right, for prospective students. And so I say yes, I'll go visit. And I visited all three schools that I had applied to in the New York area, so Columbia, NYU, Princeton, and also I went to Stanford. And the visit really sold it for me. So good job, Princeton, in organizing a good visit. I just really liked the vibe. The Everybody was really friendly,
The
nice.
faculty or the students that visited?
ev- ev- Everything, all of the
Mhm.
above, and I really remember that was the first time I walked into the industrial relations section, because they ask you what kind of topics you're interested in, and I was like, labor was on my list, and
Mm,
so they take a small group of students, and then they had to walk you over to the library because it was not centralized in the one location, so the industrial relations section is the basement of a library. So they take us to the library, and then they should show you the different place. And then I remember I was standing in Alan Krueger's office, and his pitch was basically, um, it's not so much like we have money. I mean, money was part of the thing, but basically we have support. And so it was like, whatever your heart desires, we will support it. Whatever
mm,
research you want to do for your PhD, we're there for you and we will support you. We
mm.
have we have the means, but it's not just the monetary means. It's also like we have your research. It's in our interest to make your research happen.
Mm,
And it's not just like we're good. It's also we care that you get to do what you want to do, even
right.
though I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I thought that was a good pitch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it was different from what I heard from the other places.
What were they
Uh,
saying?
they weren't saying anything or anything much.
Mhm.
I mean, they were kind of like, yeah, we do this, we do that. This is what I remember anyway. But
Mm.
yeah, and I went back after I heard that. I was like, I had already visited like Columbia, and I called back the Columbia, or the office of graduate studies, I guess. And I was like, oh, I'd like to meet with you again because I want to compare notes kind of thing. And then they're like, okay. And then, come, whatever, Thursday, 2 p.m. And I show up and nobody's there. So they had missed my appointment. So I was like, oh, you guys don't even care about coming to a meeting. So I'm going to go to Princeton. So,
That's so funny. So, okay, so tell me about that first year. Tell me which classes really which classes and professors really stood out that first year.
well, first year is tough.
Yeah.
First year, it's econometrics, micro, macro.
Hmm.
That's it.
Hmm.
It's
Who
problem
teaches you
sets.
Who teaches you econometrics that first year?
It starts with Chris Sims, who's a
Uh-huh.
Bayesian.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and and well, he later went on to win the Nobel Prize, right? And but he talks to grad students the same way he talks to his Nobel Prize peers, and so there's no toning down of the message. So you're sitting in class, you're like, wow, I don't understand what's going on. What is this Bayesian stuff? Can we take a step back? So it sounds really interesting, but I don't understand. Anyway, so
Yeah.
it was four quarters. So it was Chris Sims, uh, Harrison Hong, I think.
Mm.
And then I started liking it because he was using Hayashi,
Mm.
the textbook by
Yeah.
Hayashi, Econometrics, which I sort of was reading as it was a novel somehow.
Mm.
I liked it. And then we had Beau Honoré, the second
Mm.
half that was teaching GMM type stuff.
I see.
Uh,
So, did you, because you visited the section, the industrial relations section, does that mean that you're in or whatever? I don't quite understand the way the section is structured. Is it like
that's
invitation?
a
Oh,
good,
it's like the NBR of Princeton or
yeah.
something?
um, uh, maybe. So I knew of the section, but during first year, you really have no time to
Right,
even be part of it because you're just working on crazy problem sets every week.
right.
Um, and and so at the end of my first year, I still thought that I wanted to development. So I was
Mm,
looking for a summer job, and I thought the World Bank might be nice.
mm. Are you
So I
talking a
think it
lot to
was,
Angus Deaton when you're
yeah,
interested
well,
in development? Because I saw that you
so
thanked him in your dissertation.
yeah, I was his TA in later.
Uh,
But I went to see Anne Case and I was like, I want to work, I'd like to work at the World Bank, maybe. So she put me in touch with people there, and I spent the summer between my first and second year in DC
mm,
working at the World Bank. I was programming stuff. We were working on we had data from household surveys from a bunch of different countries.
mm,
Um, we were doing this Katz and Murphy type analysis
mm.
wage differentials and stuff. So it was very, data computer heavy
Yeah.
and stuff. And then after my summer, I come back to Princeton, and then you have to
Oh, you're
then you have
doing
to select
labor
your,
stuff. You're doing labor stuff in the development context.
yeah.
Oh, I
And
see.
then second year, I take development,
Yeah.
and I take econometrics. And I actually wasn't sure if I was going to take labor or public finance. So I went to the
Oh,
first class, the first week of labor and the first week of public finance. Um, and I loved labor instantly.
who's
It
teaching
was
that the first year?
it's Hank Farber.
Oh, it is.
Uh, and he walks into class and I think he has a box under his arm,
Yeah.
and then he sits in the front or stands, I don't know, and he's like, oh, hello class, kind of thing, and he goes, I just read this book and I bought it for you guys. So in the box are like 12 copies of Nickel and Dimed by Barbara Ehrenreich.
Yeah.
And he's like, you gotta read this if you want to understand the working world. Like,
Right.
read this. And so, and
Yeah.
then he gives us a copy and he starts talking about, I don't even know what he was talking about, but he was talking about labor, wages, people,
Yeah.
unions, whatever. It was like really interesting.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, that's the class I want to take. Compared to that, public finance was much more kind of like, you know, cut and dry and the model and this. And I was like, that
Right.
sounds boring.
Mm.
Um, so I take labor, but it was a little bit of somewhat of an accident. Or I mean, I was interested,
What is this,
but
like
I still,
03? This would be like 2003.
yes, exactly.
Mhm.
And then so I take labor. So those are my three fields: development, labor, and econometrics.
Oh, so you do
Uh,
stay with development.
yeah. Uh,
Development and you said econometrics?
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have to take a field class, a field exam?
Field, you have to select two. So I took development and labor.
Ah, okay. And you take like an
And
exam at the end
an
of it.
exam at the end of the year.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
And you also have to write a second year paper, which
Mm,
has now been morphed into a third year paper. And
mm,
I think it's even like a late third year paper kind of thing. So anyway, but back then it was during the second year you had to write a paper.
mm.
And so I was thinking, oh, I'll use the data that I used when I was at the World Bank. It's still on my computer. But that's when I realized that, you know, to really be, I guess not necessarily good, but to really be committed to development, you have to learn about the place that you're studying. So
Yeah.
I had this data from like Indonesia. It's really cool household survey data. It's amazing. But I was like, I know nothing of
Yeah.
Indonesia or Thailand or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, so I
Mm.
why don't I do the same thing but for Canada or for a country that I know, like Canada or the
Yep.
US?
Yep.
And to me, it was really the same sort of stuff. Like it was the same sort of econometrics that we'd be using, the same sort of models, same issues, perhaps more poverty type stuff when you're
Mm,
when you're in development or developing countries,
mm,
but really the same sort of, you know, general ideas.
mhm.
So then I go, well, no, I think I want to do stuff about a place that I know better or that I, you know, care more about. So then I wrote the second year paper on Canada and the Canadian Labor Force Survey,
Oh,
or
okay.
using the Canadian Labor Force Survey.
Okay. Okay. Does that become one of your That's not one of your chapters, though.
No, that's not.
There
It wasn't that interesting.
okay. Okay. Who teaches you the other labor class? Is it
So
Krueger?
labor, no, he's in DC at the time,
Right. Because
as he's often been.
wait, so he's in what's he
I
doing
think
in
he's at
DC in
I
the
think he's at the
03
Department of Labor at that time.
during the Bush administration?
You're right, that doesn't add up.
My
I know
story
he's not.
my story's always been that during the Democratic administrations he would leave, and then during the Republican administration he came
He would be
back.
back.
Well,
Well,
I
so
don't
then so
even
then
know if
that
that's true but I know that he's in the Clinton one, and I know he's in the Obama one, and so I just figured, and then I knew you were his student, so I just had
yeah, yeah.
this
So before I
theory.
met, so before he was my student, he was before I was his student, he was. I knew he did the Department of Labor. He was chief economist at the
Yeah.
Department of Labor before I showed up. So I think that was it because he after that worked at the Treasury
Hmm.
and the Council of Economic Advisors, but that was
Yeah.
after.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
this
That's what
would
the
have been the
Obama
Department
administration.
of Labor,
So
and
he does not
so
teach you
who?
labor. He's
No,
not.
so it's
Go ahead.
Hank Farber teaches labor. We had Orly Eschenfelter.
Yeah.
We had a few classes with Bentley McLeod, who visited that year.
Mm.
Um,
Oh, really? Wait, was Curry there?
no, she wasn't, or she wasn't teaching anyway, or she wasn't teaching me.
Oh, okay.
Jesse Rothstein was there. I forget if he must have been teaching a little bit.
You're around everybody though.
Jeff Kling was still in Princeton. I think he taught,
Oh,
or did he talk about? Oh, now I feel bad. I should look up my notes. I definitely remember Hank and Orly were CC Rouse, I think. But the thing is, because they wouldn't teach like the whole like one whole year, right? Or even one
oh,
whole semester, right? They would come. I think like Bentley McLeod, I think taught us for 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah,
yeah.
so it's like
Oh, I
CC, I think
see. So they're
also for like 2 or 3
rotating
weeks.
into this class. They're
Yeah,
rotating into these fixed classes,
yeah.
but they're not teaching the whole semester.
Exactly.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, so how did you get interested in time? Because that's what your dissertation's on. It's got three
Yeah.
chapters on time, right?
Yeah, yeah. So towards the end of my second year, now I know I want to do labor. Plus, the
Mhm.
industrial relations section is pretty cool. Uh, I can tell by talking to some people that you got nice offices or the setup is kind of nice. And so I'm like,
Mhm.
well, that sounds like a place where I'd like to go. But I'm not sure what I want to work on. So I think, well, maybe I could spend my summer being RA working on a project with a professor from the section. And
Okay.
so I met with all the professors and I sat with them and it's like, oh, what are you working on? Could I work with you on something kind of thing? And I remember I sat with CC Rouse, with Hank, with Alan. And Alan at the time uh, had to write a handbook chapter on rockonomics.
He was doing
Um,
that for the labor handbook.
for not labor, for the handbook of economics and culture.
Oh,
And so he had just written so I think his interest in the concert stuff, the concert tickets and economics of concerts started because he went to see the Super Bowl.
ah,
Um, and then he wrote a short piece on the scalping tickets for the Super Bowl because he was like, "Oh my God,
uh,
those prices are insane." So he wrote a short piece, and then he was contacted by this industry group from the concert industry, Polestar, that said, "Oh, it's interesting what you did for the Super Bowl. The same thing is going on with rock concerts, and we have all this data. Do you want to use it? And
who
we
is
can
it that writes it
collaborate."
and says that? Ticketmaster? No.
Polestar.
What is that?
the it's a industry group that collects data on concerts. So they
Ah,
have, I mean, I don't know if they still exist, but I'm assuming, or some kind of equivalent, or maybe it changed names. I don't know, but they had data for every concert in the U.S. The venue, the number of tickets, the total revenue, the artist, that kind of stuff.
yeah.
And so they had all this information, and they were like, do you want to do something with that? And so he was really interested, and so he wrote a piece that's in Jolly, I think,
Mm,
something material world, it's concerts in the material world, I forget,
the
something
Madonna song, kind
Madonna song kind of thing.
of.
And so he had written that. And then after he wrote that, that's when I met him. And he was saying he was just asked to write a handbook chapter for the handbook of the economics of arts and culture.
Yeah.
And in that handbook, there's papers on, auction for
Yeah.
paintings and movies and all sorts of things. And they wanted to have something on rock concerts and rock music in general.
Yeah.
And so he's asking me if I want to work on that, and I was like, yes, that sounds super cool.
Were you a
So
big music fan? I've been trying to figure out you guys, and I was like, they must be obsessed with music. But is that right?
yeah, I'm a fan. I mean, I did grow up playing the piano, but I'm also a fan. I had like a radio show when I was in high school and then again in
Ah,
college. So I like music. I like, organizing parties, going to concerts, that kind of
ah,
stuff. So I
yeah.
was kind of like, oh, that sounds super fun. So that got me my office in the industrial relations section because I was
Oh,
working with
wow.
Alan.
What were you
Um,
doing for him? When you were, are you co-author on the handbook chapter?
Yeah, I am. So he had the data. So I mean, I probably helped with, some graphs and some analysis, but the chapter's pretty thick. And
Mm,
so I remember writing, there's lots of stuff on uh, licensing rights and, radio stations and just like the history of uh, how people make their money in the music industry. And as an artist, as a musician, well, as a rock band or whatever, you can sell CDs, but you can also tour, so you can do concerts, but
mhm.
also you can sell the rights to your song, for your song to be played over the radio,
Yeah.
for your song to be in a movie, for your song to be, something like this. And
Y'all
so
analyze
I
that? Y'all analyze
what
that? The you analyze the licensing? part?
We more like wrote about because we didn't have that much data, so
Yeah.
we wrote about how it works a little bit and the different issues there. We
It's a
also it was right.
nightmare. It's a total nightmare. I had to buy the lyrics for the mixtape. Like for every chapter, I have like two lines of rap music. And
You had to buy the lyrics
well,
to.
that's what Yale wanted to do was to buy the to we weren't sure if it was covered under the free use or whatever the phrase
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
So
yeah.
fair act or
When
whatever.
you quote,
Yeah, the quote. So we like had to
yeah.
go get, purchase whatever it is, the license of the samples and this did it. It took forever. And we had to hire, it's like the most did it's like it was like trying to it was like being on a scavenger hunt. You couldn't find who even owned these songs. And so it's not like it was easy to find. They had to hire someone to do it. And then we get to this Eminem song and three different groups owned the song. So, or parts of it, they owned a third of it. And so I paid for first person and the second person, and the third person was just a squatter. And he never would even respond. And then she said, well, in the process, she said that she learned what he does is he will not respond. People will then use the music and then he sues them.
Oh, because now he knows that you've used it,
Yeah,
right?
now he
So,
knows. Like that was the whole thing was he's just out for
oh,
the
yeah,
court.
that's bad.
It was really,
Um,
yeah. So anyway, keep going.
Yeah. Anyway, around that time, it was around like, file sharing and Napster
Yeah,
and CD sales were going way down. And so the music industry was freaking out. And so there were a few papers looking at that, looking at the
yeah.
impact of file sharing on CD sales, that kind of stuff.
Right,
So I'd
right.
reviewed the literature for that. And then the other
Oh,
thing that
oh.
Alan had in there was data that he collected at rock concerts.
Alan did, Krueger did.
Yes. So we
He
went to
collected it himself.
well with students.
Yeah, but like it's raw
But
that he's going out into he was students going out in the field and talking to the scalpers.
no, talking to the people in the concert to try to get a random sample of concert goers, right? And
Oh,
so the idea is we would randomly select sections of
yeah,
say Madison Square Garden,
right.
and then show up with our little cards and golf pencils
Yeah.
and ask people, can do you mind filling this out, or can I fill it out for you?
Oh
And
my
you ask
gosh.
people how they got their ticket, did they primary or secondary sale,
Right.
how much they paid for it, that kind of stuff. Because
What'd you find?
from the official data, the official
The
price.
sticker price, right?
Yeah, and the scalper, you had some like StubHub beginning to sell kind of stuff, but it wasn't as big.
Yeah.
And so to get a really good idea, you had to go and ask people directly where they
How
got their
come you
ticket.
didn't work on culture? Why do you focus on time then? This just seems like this would be such a. I could have imagined that you did that chapter and you were like, I'm just going to do the economics of rock and roll, but you end up going into this
Um,
to this time use approach.
I don't. It's a good question. I thought I needed to do something more quote unquote serious.
Wow.
And this was you know, I I think I thoroughly participated in the project, but it wasn't like my idea.
Oh yeah, yeah,
It
yeah,
was,
sure.
and I think nowadays people write more with their advisors or on
Yeah.
teams, but I back then you really had to work on your own on your
Hmm.
dissertation. Like it's
Hmm.
solo authored your papers. And so I was
Hmm.
like, well, if I wanted to stay within rockonomics, I would have had to find like a really interesting question, a separate interesting question to answer. And I don't know, it just didn't come to me.
Hmm.
Um, and around that time, the American Time Use Survey was
Is
just
that when it's
starting.
coming out? It's just that you so that data set's for the first time coming out.
Yeah, so I hear about the
Oh.
fact that the survey, the first year was 2003 that the survey was run by the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Yeah.
And by the time it's maybe, I don't know, sometime in 2005,
Yeah.
early 2005, maybe. I hear about the fact that they've collected the data, that it's about to be released. So I'm like, oh, a brand new data source. I bet we could learn something from that. And and that's when I was like, well, let me look into this. And so I download the data, or go through the handbooks, the code book, and then I try to figure out what I could do with it. I don't remember exactly how my idea for my first chapter came about, but
Is that the
the one
weather
where I look
paper? The weather papers?
weather paper.
Is there a
So
couple of other things in there in the
a couple
dissertation?
of a couple of what?
Are there a couple of chapters that have to do with weather, or is it just one?
So two chapters have to do with weather.
That's what I
So
thought.
another one, right? So one, there's one with the American Time Use Survey, and there's another one with data that Alan Krueger had collected called the Princeton Affect and Time Use Study or something like that, the PATS.
Happiness?
Yes.
This
So
is where your
it,
happiness research is coming from?
yes.
Oh, affect.
Yeah,
Right.
affect. So Kruger is working with Danny Kahneman, and he's
Oh,
interested in. So it's like a mix of you're bringing some psychology, and so you have
wow.
data on life satisfaction as well as affect. Because affect is emotions, how you feel at certain times of the day, and so he's
Mm,
asking people about their time use, but also saying, oh, you told me that, I don't know, at 9 a.m. you were working. Well, how did you feel? Did you feel sad, happy, stressed, interested, those kinds of things?
yeah.
And so I was using those data coupled with information on the weather to see if people's responses were affected by the current weather conditions.
Mm. So what was Kruger like as your advisor? What was he like? I mean, you say in your acknowledgments, I was like looking at your dissertation, and you say in your acknowledgement, it was really nice. You just say it sounded like, I think if you said he just was very, very encouraging and encouraged all your ideas or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah. He was, he was a very nice person. He was very curious and always had
Mm,
thoughts on a billion different things,
mm,
which made conversations with him really interesting because you
huh.
start talking about something and he would go, oh, yeah, I wonder about this, I wonder about that, have you thought of this? And so that was really interesting. He could be really harsh on some things, and so when
Mm,
something was like, that's not going to work, he would definitely say, no, that's just not going to work, or that might be interesting, but how are you going to do it? And then you're like,
mm,
wait, you're right. How am I going to do it? And
right,
can I do
right.
it? And I don't think I can do it. Right.
Mm,
But he was always, you know, uh, available,
yeah,
answering questions, patience. I know he wasn't advising a lot of students, I
yeah.
think,
He only has
or at least,
19 that I was
yeah.
able to track down,
Right. So that
but
sounds
he
about
spends
right.
so much time in DC. It seems like,
Well, so that's the thing. And so I think by the time, by the time I need to select an advisor, he was just back from DC. So he didn't teach
yeah.
first year or second year, right? So a lot of
Mhm.
students were like, we don't know this guy, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's not natural to go towards him. We're going to go
Mhm.
towards the people that taught us, which made sense. So I think that's one of the things. And then another thing was that, he was very nice, but it's hard. I don't know exactly how to say it. He wasn't necessarily kind of uh, warm or touchy feely. I don't
Mhm.
know. Like he was sort of very there, present, and it fitted with me or my style. I wasn't expecting out of my advisor somebody to, talk about life, but
Right, right,
but
right.
just somebody to be there and be kind of like, this idea is good. Have you thought about this? I
Yeah.
should put you in touch with that person, kind of thing. Or reading. He was a very good writer.
Yeah,
I
that's what
find, and so
Angus said that too.
I think in terms of writing and editing, he was very
Yeah.
good. So
Mhm.
he would read what I wrote and be,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, no, this isn't clear. You got to, change, do it like this, do it like that. So he taught me a
Yeah.
lot about how to write a paper,
Uh-huh.
um, how to write a story.
Yeah.
um, how to use to take your results and your million regressions and distill it down to the story that you want to tell,
Right.
and what how you're going to tell that story, what are you going to show, what information are you going to show in your paper to help your story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
so
So, but the dissertation is on time, and the job market paper, is it the job market paper on weather and
yeah,
intertemporal substitution?
yeah,
That was a really cool paper. What I remember about it is that the labor supply elasticities are very small, and in macro, they're gigantic. That's what I
yeah.
remember. Like, I remember reading in the paper, you basically saying, uh, it's really, really small, and then they need to be really. And all I remember is they're really, really small, and it sounds like in macro they need to be really, really big for
Yeah,
for a lot of the stuff to make sense. Is that
yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah, that was the gist of it. And so I was using short-term variations in the weather and rain, which is presumably presumably exogenous at
Yeah,
that point, where it's one day or the other, right?
right. Because you're using the
Uh,
American Time Use Survey
yeah.
for this, you can get it down to the county or something like that and the day.
So it's county when there's more than 10,000 people. So I don't have the rural areas, which is
Yeah.
something if I had to redo, I would probably try to get, because I know they know, like the BLS knows.
Oh, right.
Right. And so if I had to redo, I might ask for access to their
Yeah.
restricted data to get
Mhm.
more rural areas. So it's
Mhm.
county, or for cities, it's MSA level actually. So there's a lot of matching the weather station, the location, the GIS coded weather
Oh,
station
yeah. Yeah.
to your location.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What did Orley and Dr. Farber and Kruger think about? I'm just curious, what did they think about that labor supply elasticity being small?
Oh, I think they thought it was spot on, because they're actually the ones that were grumbling about the macro estimates all
Really?
the time. Yeah,
Really?
that doesn't make sense.
Oh,
So
oh.
so they were kind of like, when you at the end I sort of back out labor elasticity, and then they were like, "Wow, that sounds about right."
Point oh one, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like, oh, that's right.
That is really cool. That is
Yeah.
really cool. So then you graduate and you go back to Canada, right? That's where you end up going.
No, well,
Okay,
yeah,
that's right.
and eventually, but my first job was in the private sector.
Oh, it was.
I worked in consulting, economic consulting, for 2 years in New York
Where
City.
at? Where was it?
Cornerstone.
Oh, you went to Cornerstone
Cornerstone in New York City.
in New York City. Did you like that? Did you like being in? I mean, you're working like a billion hours, right? Is that the deal?
That's the deal. I liked it, but I guess not enough. A revealed preference, right? Not
Right,
enough to stay.
right.
So when I had a chance to get a job in Montreal, then I took it.
Yeah. Your new work, I had ChatGPT translate one of your papers because I was like, what does this paper say? And he told it to me. So you have something that came out in 23 that's on it sounds like it's on marital separation. Is that right? You're doing things on uh the divorce and its effect on children? It was this 23 book chapter? Let's see. Hold on. Maybe I
Oh
have it.
yeah. I was like, no, okay, yes, you're right. I was like, oh, which one are you talking about? Yes. Yes,
Experience de la separation.
no, no, I got it. Yes, so I was kind of like the token economist on this research.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right, one of those where it's people in social work and psychology
Yeah.
and everything, and so they're running this really impressive survey, longitudinal survey, where they sampled people in Quebec who were recently separated from their spouses, and that have children, and they want to
Mhm.
track them across time at different waves, and understand how they fare and what are their arrangements in terms of child, who takes care of the child, and different things like this. And the thing that was pretty cool is that they asked us early on, oh, we want to have an economist because there's dollars in there. That's always what they,
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cost,
but
but we need to
non-economists.
do the cost benefit thing.
Yeah. And so they're like, oh, we want to know about their earnings and their income around the time of separation.
Yeah.
And so we need an economist. And so then they get to us, and then we're like, well, you don't really have like a control, but and they were like, yeah, whatever. So like, okay, we're gonna have to work a little harder than that. But what they did have is they managed to get admin data from the Quebec revenue agency. And
Oh,
so they got tax files for all these people
wow.
for I think it was 7 years prior to separation
Oh,
to I think at the time of writing it was plus 2, 3, or 4 years after, some years after, not that long,
but no
a few
control
years
group.
after. No control group, but because you have a longitudinal, then you can compare.
Expect so.
Uh, yeah, you can look at trajectories before and after.
What's the deal? What are you trying to figure out? You're trying to figure out if their earnings are declining or something, or what are you
Yeah,
trying to that's what you're trying
yeah,
to.
and you're thinking, oh, maybe it's different for men and women, maybe that
Right,
kind of stuff.
right.
If I remember right, there's not much action, and it's
Uh,
not that surprising when you think about it because, well, first, in Quebec, the labor force participation rate of women is quite high, especially after the changes in universal childcare.
oh,
So the participation rate of women is high for developed country.
higher
And so
than
if you
men?
work, no, not higher than men,
Oh,
but
okay.
high nonetheless, compared to women elsewhere. And so if you're already working before you split up, then you're definitely gonna keep working
Yeah.
afterwards because you don't have a choice. And so we don't see much changes in terms of earnings or
Mm,
labor income, but we do see changes in terms of household income.
mm,
And so suppose you have like a similar income, but before you had like two incomes, even if you have like some kind of equivalency scale to say, well, you had dual income, and there's two people in your household, but there's like benefits, in terms of scale, to have a joint household,
yeah.
and also for women on average have lower income than men, and
Mm,
so now when you split up, the women are worse off in comparison because they only have one income, and it's the lower income of the household.
mm.
Um,
Well, but
but
your research kind of does go in this direction. Is that why they reached out? Because you got all of a sudden a lot of research on children. I know that this is about marriage, but
yeah,
it's
but it's
like it's about the family in
yeah,
general.
it's about the
Like
family.
you move in
But
that direction.
yeah, and I think it's true. So I have a number of studies that look at either women on the labor market, so gender differences, or children development, or uh, test scores, kind of research on children, but
Yeah.
also more recently, I've worked a lot with tax files,
Mm,
so in different contexts, including intergenerational mobility in Canada. And so I think that made sense when they were like, oh, we have this information on parents and their children, and we want to go get information on the income of those parents from the tax files. We need a special expertise to look at the tax data. And so I think that's where I came in.
mm. Well, I've talked to you for an hour, a little over an hour. Um, I'm curious to kind of wrap this up. You seem to do the thing, you seem to work on the projects that you want to work on, which I know like that's how everybody is, but it's kind of like I see you sort of like having so many different interests. Is that, and even when you told your story earlier, it was just like you had all these range of interests. And I'm just curious, is that a correct reading? Like, you just are working on the topics that you find really interesting, and that these topics in labor just have continued to be things that you just find to be pretty interesting. I guess I'm just asking, is that accurate, that you just sort of follow your heart a little bit?
Follow the heart and maybe a little bit the data as well.
Yeah.
So, uh, I'm an empirical person, and so you need data to sort of do anything. And so either
Yeah.
you create the data by, as we did with Krueger, by running surveys, asking people how much they paid for their ticket,
Yeah.
or you rely on existing data sources. But also, what I've done in the recent past was to help develop admin data and linkages of
Mhm.
administrative data in Canada.
Mm.
Canada's not quite yet at the Scandinavian level of registry for everything, but we're sort of getting there, both at the provincial and the federal level, which opens up so many
Oh.
avenues for research. That's really, really cool. Um,
So where
and
are
I
you gonna
find
go?
that
Where do you
that's
see
that's yeah.
yourself going then? Where do you see yourself going now that there's all these new empirical opportunities for you? Is there new topics that you're getting excited about?
Well, I've been working for the past few years. I have a few papers on intergenerational mobility,
Oh,
the way one's income in adulthood is related to the income of their parents when they were
yeah,
growing up,
right.
and this is like there's so many questions that are interesting with this, right? You can look at, especially when you bring in linkages with other data sources. So now we can identify who's an immigrant, who's the son of an immigrant or the daughter of an immigrant,
Hmm.
and we can ask all these questions to better understand the mobility that we see or don't
Hmm.
see.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm like super deep into those kind of questions because there's all these data available, and I
yeah.
think that's really interesting.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, it's been really nice having you on the show, and I really have enjoyed. I'm so glad we got to finally I got the sun in my eyes. Finally get to talk after all these years. Uh, I was so surprised because I have the database of like all of Kruger's students, and I was like, I remember Marie. We spoke a million years ago about that weather data. So it was really good to see you.
Yeah, I'm curious
I
now.
did.
I'm looking
I
go
had
back at your
this.
interviews. Who else did you interview from Kruger's student? I'll go
You're
back
the
and look at
first
that.
one. You're the
I'm
first
the
one.
first one. There
Yeah,
you
yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah. Elaine Liu, Diane.
Yes.
There's a few others that I've just got like a list, and haven't like contacted everybody, but I have three. I have you and two other people that I wanted to talk to.
That's really cool. I really enjoyed listening to some of your podcasts. So thank you for putting this out in the world, and
Yeah,
providing this information.
yeah, yeah. Good. Well, maybe I'll see you at a conference or something. But it's nice to meet.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Getting
Thank
up
you very much.
all to the grave. She hated when I called.